All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Dr. Cece Says, my Facebook Live series. Tonight, we are going to be talking about BIPOC Mental Health Month. And so, just to recap, last week when we talked about BIPOC, we were talking about Black, Indigenous, people of color. Specifically, we're talking about them this month because what we know is we usually call this Minority Mental Health Month, but we're using the word BIPOC, not minority. And why is that? Because there is nothing minor about us. Okay. So, last week we talked a lot about racial trauma and the impact of racial trauma. And so we also talked about solutions, right? How do we address racial trauma? So we last week talked about self-care. We also talked about rest and how important rest is for us. This week, we're going to talk about validation. Okay. So before we jump in, hey sis, before we jump in, if you are here, drop a hello in the chat so I know you're here. If you are watching this on the replay, drop a replay in the chat, right, as you're watching. Okay, so validation, what is that? All right, what are we talking about when we talk about validation? So, validation is defined as recognizing or affirming that someone's feelings or opinions are valid and worthwhile. Validation is something that we discuss in therapy all the time, and that's because when it's used appropriately, it's a great tool to help us hear other people. And also, when someone feels validated, then they feel understood. And so in therapy, what that does, and really in life in general, what that does is it helps to soften people, right? So it helps people to feel heard and it can pave a way for more understanding. So it helps us with our communication. Now, there are two ways that we can do this. So we can validate others and we can validate ourselves. And we're going to talk about both of those tonight, okay? So when we don't validate other folks, what happens? They feel unheard, they feel dismissed, sometimes they even feel disrespected. And that usually leads to the other person shutting down or becoming defensive. And so, an example of invalidating someone is telling them that they're overreacting or that they're imagining things. This happens to everybody, right? But specifically for people of color, this can happen when we experience things like microaggressions. And we talked about microaggressions a little bit last week. So when someone's trying to share their experience and they hear, "Oh, you must have been mistaken," or "It didn't really happen that way. It couldn't have happened like that." Has anybody ever experienced that? I know I have multiple times. If you've experienced something like that, drop me in the chat for me. Let's see who all in here has experienced somebody invalidating what they felt or what they heard. And so y'all, I saw this recently on this show called All Rise. So it's one of those like legal dramas, and I'm watching it on Hulu. And so there's a judge, she's a Black woman, and in this particular episode, she was driving from the courthouse kind of late at night, and there were protests happening, and she had her best friend with her. Best friend happens to be a white male attorney who also works at the same courthouse. And so she's driving really slowly because there are all these protests going on. And she sees a young Black female who is in an interaction with the police. And the girl looks very just upset and anxious and scared. And the police officer looks a little jittery as well. So she decides to stop her car and she's going to get out and try to diffuse the situation. And she did diffuse it to a certain extent. And while she was diffusing the situation, she got herself arrested, right? So now she's handcuffed. So the best friend gets out of the car and he's trying to figure out what's going on. He ends up talking to the police officer and he's able to vouch for her, right? Like, I know she says she's a judge. She really is a judge, right? So back up a little bit. When she was trying to diffuse the situation, she's telling the police officer, "I'm a judge. I have my credentials." He didn't even give her an opportunity to show anything. And so she is now, having to be vouched for by her best friend, who happens to be a white male, who also didn't have to show his credentials to the police officer. So the first thing the best friend says is, "What did you do?" And so for her, as they go through the episode, that's the part that really made her upset, like for a longer amount of time. So sure, she was upset about being arrested and all of that, but what really made her upset was that her best friend's reaction, the first reaction was, "What did you do?" As if she wasn't in this situation because of something somebody else did. And so as she's trying to share her experience, the best friend says, "Well, I think he was just trying to do his job." Right. So while people are trying to, sometimes help you see the situation from their perspective, they're actually invalidating your experience or your perspective. And so, yes, that's a show, right? They were definitely trying to make a point on the show, but stuff like that happens all the time. And I'm sure all of us here could vouch and say the same thing, that you have had times where people didn't understand your perspective because it wasn't theirs. And because of that, they invalidated. They tried to say that what you felt or what you experienced really wasn't the case. And so that's pretty rough, right? I think we could all agree. But guess what? Y'all, we invalidate ourselves all the time as well. We ignore how we're feeling. We push ourselves to do things that we're really not in a space to do. And we will say not so great things to ourselves when our feelings start to rise to the top. Right. So I can't tell y'all how many times I've heard from just people in general. So people in therapy, but also my loved ones, they'll say things like, "I know I shouldn't feel this way." Why not? Or if they're crying, they'll apologize for crying. Or if they get upset, they'll say, "Okay, give me a couple of minutes and, I'll feel this for a few minutes and then I'm going to move on." What if a couple of minutes isn't enough time for you to get yourself together? Right? So in those instances, we are invalidating our experience. We're invalidating how we feel. And so y'all feel free to drop in the chat if that's ever any of you all, right? If you ever said any of those things to yourself or out loud. And the reason a lot of times that we're doing this is because for some reason we think we're supposed to suck stuff up. We think we're supposed to move on because it's just life, right? But y'all, like we said last week, just because it's happening, it doesn't make it okay. So just because we've experienced racism, just because we've experienced discrimination, just because we see oppression, just because we have witnessed racial violence or even experienced racial violence, that doesn't make it okay just because it happens. And so we have to be really intentional about taking care of ourselves. Okay. I see Tasha said guilty. Yeah. Yes, sis. I think if we are all honest, we've all been guilty of this at some point. Right. So what do we do to increase validation of our experience? And so you all know I don't ever like to talk about an issue without giving us a solution. So let's talk for a few minutes about what we do to increase validation. So one, we learn to validate ourselves. We learn to identify our emotions. Don't ignore them. Don't try to push them down. Don't try to make them, smaller than they are. And then we address them in healthy ways. And that's where I think a lot of times we can go wrong. We will invalidate, we will ignore, we will try to push to the side. And then when they bubble over, we looking surprised. But the emotions have to go somewhere. So we have to learn how to appropriately and in a healthy way address them. Right? We also have to learn how to advocate for ourselves. And so what that means is using effective communication, actually saying, "Hi, this is what I need," right? Or "No, actually, I don't want to do that." Or "No, I don't have the space to do that." All right, that's something that I've been working on for a while. It's not that maybe I don't want to do it. I just don't have the space for it right now. And that's okay, right? So when we advocate for ourselves, we ensure that we get our needs met. And then we also have to set good boundaries. Now, y'all know how I feel about boundaries, right? So we have to learn how to say no sometimes. And what is no? No is a whole sentence all by itself. It does not require an explanation. Yeah. And hey, Danielle. Yeah, so that's number one. Number one, we have to learn how to validate ourselves. Number two, we have to lean into our support system. All right. Oh, Jay said, I think most have been raised or expected to be tough. Definitely, definitely. And that goes back, he's speaking to why are we invalidating ourselves? A lot of times that's been modeled for us. That's what we have seen. All right. So definitely. Yeah. Okay, y'all. Number two, we lean into our support system. Why is that part important? That's important because we need to be in a validating environment. That does not mean that everybody is going to have the same perspective, but we need to be in environments where people care about us and we care about them. And so people will do the work, right? So not all my friends look like me, right? Not even all my closest friends look like me. And definitely not all of my friends have had the same experiences that I've had, right? Or been, lived in the same type of areas or whatever. But one thing that all of my friends have in common, they are in a position and they care enough about me that they want to do the work to understand my experience as best they can, right? So they might ask questions. They might just, simply validate that a situation or a microaggression that I experienced or whatever is hard, right? But whatever it is, even if they can't quite understand where I'm coming from, they love me enough, they care about me enough that they're willing to still listen and try to validate that my perspective is important and that it's worthwhile just because it's mine. So we don't have to have all of the same types of people in our circle, but we do have to have people that are willing to do the work. And the flip side of that is we also have to do that for other folks, right? So we need to be able, when other people are going through and they come to us to talk to us, we need to be able to validate that their experience and their perspective is theirs. It's valid just because it's theirs. Okay. Now, the third thing is we have to show up as ourselves in all spaces. So, for you all that's been following me, y'all know authenticity and our magic is really important to me. So, living our life as our authentic self and learning more about who we are through our magic will help us be able to validate our experience daily. It'll also help us make sure that we put ourselves in places where other people will validate us. So, y'all, magic, for those that don't know, magic is an acronym that I came up with that stands for our mannerisms, our attitude, our genuineness, our identity, and our core values. So those are the things about ourselves that make us who we are. Those are the things that help us walk out our purpose. Those are the things that other people see about us and that makes other folks fall in love with us, right? So we don't always see our magic. Sometimes other people see our magic before we do. And so one thing that I've been doing recently is doing these workshops, trying to help other people tap into their magic, lean into who they are authentically, and know that they're awesome and that there is somebody out there that needs to see them, hear them, experience them just the way that they are. Right. So when we're leaning into our magic, when we're being our authentic self, that is actually going to help us validate because we know exactly who we are and we know that our experience is worthwhile. Our experience is valid. And that also means that we're not going to put up with everything. We're not going to put ourselves in positions where we're in invalidating environments, or if we happen to end up in invalidating environments, we're going to make sure that we get out of that as soon as we can, right? So when you are being your authentic self and you are showing up as yourself, showing up the way that you're supposed to be in all spaces, you're going to be validated. Your perspective, your experience, who you are, what you've gone through, all of those things are going to be validated. Hopefully by you first, and then also by other folks. So, like I said, I did a couple of magic workshops in the past month. And when I tell y'all, it was so awesome, hopefully for the attendees, but definitely for me, because y'all, I saw people realize parts of themselves that they had not realized before. I saw people lean into their awesomeness, and they were encouraging other people and making the environment a safe space so other people could lean into their own magic. And they, well, we all kind of created this place where people could learn how to validate themselves and practice it, work on it. And it was just really a blessing. And so again, y'all, when we are not validating, when we are not invalidating environments, we feel trauma, like racial trauma, right? We feel all of these things so much more than when we put ourselves in spaces where we can be healed, right? When we validate ourselves, when we make sure that we have a good circle, when we make sure that we're doing all the things that would create a validating environment for us, that creates a space for healing. That creates a space where we can feel safe, where we can also be creative. Because that's another thing, right? When we're healthy, we are creative. Okay. Y'all, we are, oh, thank you, Shalonda. Y'all, we are such awesome people. And I could say that for everybody, but I'm talking about BIPOC folks right now. I'm talking about people of color. We are such an awesome groups of people, communities of people. And we deserve to live life and live it more abundantly. And I know that because God told us that He came so that we might have a more abundant life. And so, one way for us to live more abundantly is to take care of ourselves so we show up in the healthiest way possible. So, I want y'all to do something for me, okay? You know, I like to give homework. So, tomorrow, and it will say tomorrow, but also just in days to come, look for opportunities to validate yourself and to validate somebody else. If you find yourself in invalidating environments, figure out what you're going to do about it. Do you need to reflect on your feelings and take some space? Do you need to advocate for yourself, set some new boundaries, or lean into your support system? Or do you just need to be more of yourself in that space and lean into your magic, right? Either way, do something to acknowledge and affirm that your feelings and your experiences are valid and worthwhile because they are. All right. All right. Hey, Siobhan. Yeah, so I'm just looking at the chat. Hey, Janice. Thank y'all for joining me. Yeah, so y'all listen. We are going to continue to talk about BIPOC Mental Health Month. Next week, we'll probably talk a little bit more about therapy specifically and how therapy can help Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Okay, and then I'm also probably gonna drop some facts and some data and some percentages for you all on my Heart and Soul page, so you all can see some of that as well. Okay, but for tonight, that's it. I hope you all have a great night and stay blessed.